Welcome to another Leon Charney report. Today we are telecasting from the University of Haifa with Steve Forbes, who is the publisher of Forbes magazine, the preeminent financial magazine in the world. It's now published in Israel in Hebrew. And if you go to Russia and you're lonely, you can get it in Russian. Where else are you, Steve? How many places?
8 around the world: Japan, China, South Korea. We publish an edition out of Dubai, Poland. You mentioned Russia, Turkey as well.
Wow. So you're here to get an honorary doctorate from the University of Haifa, and they are welcoming you with a great applause, shall we say. But you're in Israel. You know what's going on in the Middle East. You follow it. You and I have talked about it. We know Iran. We know the problems with Iran. If you're giving advice to Israeli government officials, what would you say to them tonight, especially about Iran? I know that on my show the last time you thought that there should be boycotts, economic boycotts, because what you said was that basically they have no refineries there. Is it working? Can it work? What do you think?
Well, no real pressure has been put on Iran. The economy is a shambles. I don't think it would take much to put it even in worse shape. The oil industry would be producing at least 2 million more barrels a day if they had kept up with the technology there. So in addition to cutting off their gasoline, they import about 40% of their gasoline. They have the crude oil, but they don't have the refineries. Other things that can be done is to put pressure on companies outside of the U.S. to cut off relations with Iran. It has been suggested, including by the former finance minister of Israel, Netanyahu, for pension funds in America. Florida's doing it. California's going to do it this summer, to divest of companies that do business with Iran, put pressure on that way. But ultimately, if the economic pressure does not work, and we really haven't tried it yet, then other measures have to be considered. These lunatics cannot be allowed to get the bomb.
Ahmadinejad had a headline in the Israeli newspapers today that it's only a matter of time before he wipes out this country, and probably Jews alongside. So if you have an extra room in your house, I'd like to rent it in case he wants to get all the Jews, so maybe we can survive, you know. I happen to be a Jewish guy. So what do we do to a guy like this?
Well, that's not going to be allowed to happen. It's on the one hand, he denies the Holocaust, and on the other hand, he makes it clear he wants to finish what started in the 1940s. And so that's why he cannot be allowed to get nuclear weapons, because he means to use them. Occasionally you get these lunatic revolutionaries who go beyond rhetoric, and he believes that, I forget what is the 12th Mahdi or the 20th is going to come back, and he doesn't mind bloodshed. And you get these creatures every now and then. So unfortunately, because of what's happened in Iraq, our American credibility in the Middle East is not very strong right now. And so I hope behind the scenes we're making clear, working with opposition groups in Iran. There are a lot of minority groups in Iran. We should be working with their leadership to start to undermine this regime. The regime itself is unpopular in Iran. They couldn't win an honest election. But they hold the levers of power. They hold the police power. So I hope that before he leaves office, and if he doesn't do it, then his successor, which I hope would be Rudy Giuliani, will take whatever measures are necessary to stop them. They cannot be allowed to get nuclear weapons because they will use them.
Do you have any stringers there in Iran that report for you or can report?
No, we do nothing with Iran. All you need to know is that these lunatics are running the show, and the rest is
give me a plan.
Superfluous.
Who would put the pressure on? Would it be George Bush and company? Would it be the Europeans? You have to have a collective agreement.
Well,
there.
I think the Europeans, they're not going to take a lead, and certainly the Russians aren't, and the Chinese aren't. It's got to be the U.S. And so I think we have to make it clear that that we will put a blockade on Iran, i.e. block the importation of gasoline and other essential materials. We have to make clear that we're going to put real pressure on companies because they do use banking facilities. We do own a lot of their equity, that they cannot do business with this regime, that we're serious about regime change. And working with opposition groups. And if that doesn't work in the next year or two, then we have to take other
military
measures,
action?
i.e., yes, no getting around it.
You're not against that?
If you cannot, if you don't want them to get nuclear weapons, you have to consider every option to stop that.
The problem in the United States today is the popularity of George Bush is very low. Could he do something like that today? Does he have enough vox populi, power from the people, to do it? You know, in this country, by the way, George Bush is beloved. They love him. I mean, he could win the election there hands down. Rudy could take him as vice president, and he'd go through the wall. But and if he doesn't take it, how dangerous is it, especially to this little country here called Israel? I mean, this guy really, that's one of his public policy statements, is to wipe out this country.
Yes, it's an existential issue, and it's as basic as you get. And so the Iranians have to be stopped. This regime has to be stopped. If Iran was Norway, no one would care, but they're not. They're quite the opposite. And in terms of whether President Bush could do it, if he starts laying the groundwork now that this is a serious thing, this goes beyond the normal give and take of American politics, he can do it. And people may be skeptical of his motives, but I think it's well known now, more than a year or two ago, that the Iranians are going for nukes. They are thumbing their nose at everyone, including the UN. So it is as if he has to establish the case that they're doing it. That's already out there. The question is, what do we do in response? And if he makes it clear this is not going to be allowed to happen, we are going to take substantial economic measures. If the Europeans want to go along, fine. If they don't, our Navy will stop them from doing so. Then I think things can happen, because inside Iran, you might say there might be two classes of mullahs. The nuts, like the current head of the current president, and what you might call the money mullahs. That is those who mouth their pieties, but who are corrupt. There's a lot of corruption in that government, a lot of bank accounts they have overseas. Those folks don't want to lose that gravy train, so to speak.
We froze, I worked with Carter on the hostage crisis, and we froze the assets at that time, if you remember. I think they're still frozen. I'm not sure they've ever been opened up. I don't know.
They're still frozen, but there's still entities that have relationships with Iran operating in the U.S. that we can clamp down on. And the key thing is to publicly identify major international companies still doing business with Iran and start to take measures. You see, once people realize you're going to go beyond the resolutions and the rhetoric, which everyone knows is a wink and a nod, and start taking some substantive measures, then inside Iran, opposition groups will take heart. And maybe we won't have to go to the ultimate steps.
So they'll connect. If you were an Israeli citizen today, would you be very worried about all these threats?
You have to be worried. I mean, the immediate neighbors of Israel, Israel's been dealing with for 60 years. It's tragic, but you can do it. Iran with nuclear weapons is a whole different category, and that you really have to worry about. Let me say this. If the nuclear threat of Iran was removed, this global fanaticism, Islamic fanaticism, would suffer a devastating blow.
You believe that?
Iran finances the terrorist groups. They give them hope and encouragement. There's the feeling that they're going to run us out of the Middle East, that they're going to overwhelm Israel. They believe this. And if Iran goes the other way, if that regime is changed, boy, you have a whole different dynamic.
That's a crucial point. I mean, no one ever talks about that. You're saying you wipe out the nuclear threat from Iran, that may change the whole picture of Al-Qaeda in the world, because that...
They will do bad things, but the idea that they can get the ultimate weapon and triumph goes by the boards.
I noticed today that Egypt is going to try and put up some kind of ministry or ambassador with Tehran. If I were an Israeli, I wouldn't feel that good about that either, although there are people who say it's better to talk than to shoot. What do you think about Egypt, period?
Well, Egypt is worried because they have their own extremist internal pressures.
We call it Soros in French, which means problems.
Yeah, and so they're wobbling. And again, if we take a firm lead on Iran, none of the neighbors are going to applaud us, but by golly, behind the scenes, they're going to be mopping their brow and saying, thank God, nobody wants a nuclear-armed Iran. Nobody, other than the extremists.
All right. George Bush really does not want to talk to Syria. They're a terrorist country. Ehud Olmert, who's the prime minister now with a very low standing in the country, there's some rumors that he may have some kind of conversation with Syria. What's your take on Syria?
Well, let's ratchet up a level. To have an agreement, a real peace agreement, you need two parties that genuinely want to do it.
Yes. That's
what happened with Begin and Sadat back in the late 1970s. They both had their reasons to make it happen. Those conditions don't exist right now between the West and Israel and Syria. Syria believes that time is on their side. They have recovered from the shock of 2003, when for a while they thought, "Oh my God, the whole thing is crumbling." So, what would you talk about? Giving back the Golan Heights? Not a good time to be doing that. Any preemptive, any unilateral move by Israel today will be seen as capitulation.
Looks weak. That makes it look weak.
So you have to change the circumstances. If we move firmly against Iran, starting with major substantive economic steps that signal we are serious about this and not just going through the verbal motions, then Syria may have a change of heart. But they think now they can maybe grab back Lebanon, even though many elements in Lebanon make clear they don't like what's happening there. So what's the point of talking to Syria? Syria thinks they've got the whip hand right now.
So Condoleezza Rice, in some backward way, had some conversations there because they want to make Iran a partner to the solving of the problem of Iraq between the Sunnis, the Shiites, and the Kurds. Did you read that and laugh, or did you read that and cry?
Well, it's like taking a poisonous snake to bed and hope it doesn't bite you. It's a dangerous thing to do.
By the way, if you go to a store tonight here, you're going to find out that the last time you were in Israel, the shekel was probably $4.50. Today it's about $3.90, which means that the American dollar is weak. Why is the American dollar weak today, Steve?
American dollar is weak because our central bank, the Federal Reserve, is printing too many of them. I see it in commodity prices. You see it in the gold price. And even though until recently the Fed had raised interest rates from 1% to about 5.25% now, raising the nominal cost of money and not taking out the excess that you've created does no good. Remember, in the late 70s, early 1980s in the U.S., we had 20% interest rates.
I remember very well.
It was your opportunity. and extremely high rates of inflation. So raising interest rates alone doesn't do it. You have to have a monetary policy that goes with it. So we have not done what we call open market operations yet to remove the excess liquidity that was created in 2004 and part of 2005. That's not been done yet.
So the world believes that the sterling and the euro is worth more, has more value than the dollar?
Well, so far, those two central banks haven't printed as many pounds and euros as we've printed dollars. So there's a mild inflation in the world. Ben Bernanke, our chairman of the Federal Reserve, he gave speeches before he went to the Feds talking about excess savings in the world. No, it's excess money creation is the problem. So you take things like equity funds in the United States. They're on steroids right now. They're good instruments. They're much needed right now, but they've been artificially hyped because of this easy money. So there is excess liquidity, and so far Chairman Bernanke has not mopped it up. He could do it tomorrow.
How would you take out excess liquidity? Raising rates?
No, all the Fed would have to do is sell bonds from its portfolio. It owns hundreds of billions of U.S. Treasuries. So when they sell the bonds, the dealer sends them the check, and the money disappears. It's very easy, the mechanism.
Why do you think he's not doing that? I mean, you travel all the time. I mean, you're in here for 24 hours, and I know you've been in Brazil last week, and so you see what's going on with the American dollar. Why would Bernanke not move on that? Why is he holding back?
I think he still puts too much stock in inflation indexes.
I see.
The Consumer Price Index and their whole slew of others, producer, PPI, and the whole slew. But that's backwards looking. And it also doesn't measure what you might call asset inflation. One reason why our housing market went on steroids in the United States, and where in effect we built in 2 years what we'd normally build in 3 or 4, was the excess liquidity out there. Standards go down. Sloppy practices start to take place. So it hit housing. It's going to hit other parts. But because that excess liquidity is still out there, the U.S. housing market, I think, at least short term, is going to do better than some of the pessimists thought a couple of months ago.
Well, what also happens, Steve, and you've seen it as much as I have, maybe more, you follow it, the subprime market, let's say it gets into trouble, but you have so many hedge funds out there and so many different types of funds that you didn't have in the early 80s and 90s. They gobble it up, they package it, and they sell it out, and they securitize it again. So this housing problem, which probably doesn't really exist or does exist temporarily, will be gobbled up. I know Wall Street guys trying to buy up this paper like crazy. And you remember the big savings and loan guy. I mean, you remember he nearly went to jail. I forgot his name. Well, I think Milliken or Perlman, one of those guys, they bought up all those banks at that time. They made a fortune on it. So, you know, the economy works if you have, as youth have a free economy. And otherwise, it gets, you know, people are nervous about, they don't understand what you understand and a little bit what I understand. They get nervous. They go to England, they see the sterling is $2. They don't want to go there on vacation. They get nervous. This country is already applying to the government here for subsidies because their exports are problematic because their conversion is in trouble. And it all really stems from the United States policy. I mean, that we control. You don't think Putin is controlling the world policy right now, right?
He's acting as if he is, but they're
and about the Chinese, they're holding many of our bonds, right? They could dump their bonds, but why would they dump their bonds?
Why would they shoot
no
themselves?
Sense.
They need trade with the United States very badly for their modernization.
It doesn't make any sense.
So, what would they do? They'd take a huge capital loss. Somebody who was smart and had liquidity would buy the bonds up on the cheap and make a nice profit on it. So
it's a good idea. I think I'll quit and go to the Ginny Mabe desk right now. Why don't you run for president again?
Tried it twice, didn't make it.
I remember your bus.
Yes, in Iowa and elsewhere, New York City. But my role now is agitator. I like.
Are you still active in the Republican Party?
Still pushing issues like low taxes, flat tax, which I think would be a great thing for Israel if they put in a tax system like such as Hong Kong or some of the European countries have put in.
What kind of, you mean a flat tax?
Single rate, generous exemptions for adults and for children. About 15 countries have done it. It's worked very well elsewhere. This country, which now grows at, recently 6%, but they expected 5% this year. This country's capable, at least for a while, of growing 7-8% in real terms without a resurgence of inflation. You're on the cusp of high technology. You have a very educated workforce. It's a hard-working workforce, despite some of the crazy government policies which punishes work in this country. So, little aside there. But if you remove some of those obstacles, put in a sensible tax system, and do a few other things, and remove some internal barriers, this place would go off like a rocket, which would be good for security. Because even though the neighbors here don't like Israel, if Israel really takes off, people are going to note, how did they do it? Well, they did this, and the only hope for this region in the world is the development of a middle class. It's no guarantee of future peace, but if people are too busy driving the kids to school, paying off mortgages, the to-do list of terrorist activities goes down. They're too busy doing other things. It's not a given. And people say, well, look at bin Laden, he was a middle class, upper class guy. But the followers are people who feel there is no future, who feel that they have to go for this nihilistic, Nietzsche-like fanaticism. You start drying that recruits up, and then they become more of a police problem rather than a fundamental threat to civilization.
Your father and your family have historically had a great affinity towards Israel. I can remember the days when I was representing Ezer Weitzman, the former defense minister, and your father would come and visit him, and Weitzman was always thrilled to meet him and always excited. Aside from that, he always got a free subscription to Forbes, he told me. But he enjoyed your father very much. You've been here 6 times already. What gives you that affinity for this country?
Well, it's a democracy. It's a refutation of the cult of death, these nihilistic forces in the world, which have been really a threat since World War I. They emerged from the rubble of World War I. And a vibrant economy, and now you're on the cutting edge of a technology as well, so what's not to like?
It's been remarkable. I mean, I'm an American, you're an American. Despite the fact that they had a war last year, despite the fact that the best job in this country is criminal lawyer, because everybody's either got some kind of advisement or not, half your ministers, who knows where they are, that's the best job. Despite that, the economy's doing great.
Economy's doing great, and part of it is the reforms that were put in by when Netanyahu was a finance minister, starting to remove some of these barriers which have held this country back economically. The decision years ago to put an emphasis on high technology, which fits like a glove here, wise thing to do. And if you continue to make these liberalization moves, removing internal cartels, lowering tax rates, putting in a simple low tax system such as a number of other countries have done, wide open, wide open.
When you go to the Middle East, do you go to the other countries, Jordan, Egypt? Do you visit those countries?
Mostly the Gulf Coast countries.
What's going on in Dubai? It's tremendous.
Yeah,
what is happening over there?
They even have a ski slope.
They even have a Forbes magazine there.
They do. That's where we publish our Arabian edition. It's amazing.
How do they get a ski slope there? Artificial snow?
Artificial, yeah. Dubai is sort of Las Vegas without the casinos.
Can that last, Steve?
Well, the reason it does well is the ruling sheikh there decided a while back to put in policies to encourage growth. 80% of the population is foreign in Dubai today. And it shows that when things are opened up and when you have an environment of economic growth, it happens, and one hopes that other parts of the Middle East start to take note.
So they are not dependent on oil any longer in Dubai?
They've had very little oil. Some of their neighbors have, but they've always had to live by their wits. They run trade, they break blockades with Iran. They've had to live by their wits, and so they thrive in this kind of environment.
Do you know they have king there? They have who runs?
They have a sheikh who is part of the Emirates, but each rules their own little part of it. And about at least 10-15 years ago, he made the decision, we're going to modernize, and by golly, they've done it.
Do you know him, by the way?
Met him a couple of times.
You want to take the Prime Minister of Israel there and make a peace between Dubai and... I was in Bahrain and very close to the Al Khalifa family. And at the time I was there, he was an emir. He's now a king. And they put in a hybrid democracy there because they've had their own problems. But viscerally, I found those people really wanted to know Israel. They wanted to be involved. And I'm sure that there can be some kind of breakthrough in the Emirates. Qatar had something going on. Dubai, I'm sure. So maybe we'll use our muscle here to do something for Haifa University.
And when you have a really booming economy, you go there with a position of real strength. People want to know, how are you doing it? How can we do it? Like Ireland.
Ireland's doing great.
Ireland wants to follow their example.
Talk to me about Tony Blair. What do you think?
Well, I think
he was a courageous man.
What made him unpopular and ultimately ran him out of office in Britain is what's going to make him great, I think, in the history books.
I agree with you totally.
He understands the threat out there, and he did not take, as some of his predecessors did, half measures. He remembers historically what happened in the 1930s. He was not going to make that mistake.
Yeah, I think he's a great man. You know Gordon Brown at all?
I don't know of him, but I think he will try to continue the special relationship. I hope so.
France has a new...
by the way, on Britain,
yeah.
I'm not sure about the conservative leader, Mr. Cameron, whether he has that strong view of a close relationship between Britain and the United States.
Really? France. Interesting man over there, huh? It's like
by real
third
estate
revolution.
in Paris, you said. If he follows through and starts to make some fundamental reforms, that will be of historic importance, because Western Europe, as you know, has been relatively stagnant for 30 years. Very little job creation outside of government agencies. And if he starts making some of these free market reforms, other countries, Germany will do so, Italy will be forced to do so. It'll have a profoundly positive impact. What Sarkozy recognized, one, he's not part of the old buddy-buddy establishment. He's a little different breed. And he knows that one of the largest French-speaking cities in the world is London. 500,000 French in London. Why? Because they want to move ahead. They feel at home. It's stagnant. Hundreds of thousands of French people have moved to the United States for the same reason. He wants to get that economy moving again.
It's amazing. If he can change France, I think if we have some courage out of him, he can affect Europe. And if Europe is affected, we get some more strength in the foreign policy that you would like. And that's a great hope.
It is. And I think one of the good things is he won't be reflexively anti-American.
Or Israel, by the way.
Or Israel. And he'll disagree from time to time, but it'll be on a case-by-case basis instead of a reflex.
All right, let me talk a little politics, and we're running out of time. It's always great to sit and talk with you. It's like being in my living room. John McCain.
He's got a very real problem. He was the front runner, as you know, in the Republican Party 6 months ago. The base of the party distrusts him. He has not been able to overcome that distrust. So his campaign is flagging. It's in deep trouble. Thompson, the former senator,
Tommy Thompson,
Fred Thompson.
Oh, Fred Thompson. He's announced.
He's going to get in the race. That will hurt McCain. And so I think Rudy Giuliani can win the Republican nomination.
What about Romney? What do you think?
He's going to be hurt by Thompson coming in, because Governor Romney wanted to be the conservative alternative to Rudy Giuliani, and Fred Thompson cuts into that base. So the race has been scrambled in the Republican Party.
Steve, we're out of time. It's always a pleasure.
Good to see you, Leon.
We'll see you back in the
Thank
States, and I don't know if we can give you a studio like this, a beautiful studio, but
very nice.
Maybe we'll export Haifa University to the U.S.
Terrific.
In any case, this has been a pleasure. We will continue with another Forbes interview. Probably Paul Maidman, his editor, put into one show, and you'll have 2 Forbes for one shot. We'll see you next week. Okay.